Welcome to Radio Gaianym, bringing you a Sophianic broadcast featuring visionary teacher John Lamb Lash.
You're on.
Today is the 14th of March 2018 and I'm Meiga here with John Lash, and we're going to be talking about the SuperLearning event for Radio Gaianym. So John, take us back to the beginning of the SuperLearning event, when it started.
Well, you know, I discovered the Mandela effect in the summer of, what was it, 2016, I think so. Yeah. And at the time that I discovered it, I then realized that from the point of view of Gaian Tantra and planetary Tantra, that this event, this Mandela effect, was both the evidence and the instrument of what I have been calling Sophia's correction. So I found myself faced with an extraordinary opportunity to take a topic that was being discussed by millions of people around the world and to spin it around and bring attention to the Gnostic message, and at the same time to apply the Gnostic technique of investigation to decoding the effect. So it was a fantastic opportunity for me at that time, and the timing of it was absolutely astonishing because I had already introduced to the students of planetary Tantra the notion that the Aeonic Mother has agency. This is a very esoteric, very haunting phrase, right? Very powerful phrase. Now I had an opportunity to put that into practice. I had the opportunity to show what it means that the Aeonic Mother has agency. So the intelligence of the planet has hacked into the internet and is manipulating the memes and content of the internet, and I showed how that was done, right, in the MED talks. Well, as always happens, and you know this very well, abundance and generosity are characteristic of our mother, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. And when you're on her frequency and you start to learn something, you start to take in what she's teaching, it comes in great abundance, doesn't it?
Mm. And it changes as well, and it changes you. So whatever you're focused on at the time, it just it comes as a great rush, but it's very crystalline. It's also very crystalline. So it enables, well, for me, it works. It enables me to ride that rush and ask very specific questions about, you know, what I'm working on, whether it is you know, DNA, chromatin, what's happening in the with the genome. These have been big themes.
Right, big themes.
You know, of mine, and the answers come very, very, very quickly. But everything links up. All of a sudden, it just all comes together.
Yeah, the characteristic of learning in planetary Tantra, which is the linking of your mind and your power with the mind and power of the earth, has always those two characteristics. There's a rush, which I call the mythophrenic fugue, or the energy of the rush develops into a mythophrenic fugue. There's always a rush, but at the same time, there's that still point of sobriety of the Snoopy faculty. You remain in your Snoopy, steady and sober. You're a detective. You remain in that crystalline state of mind, and yet at the same time, there is a rush going on with the knowledge that you're acquiring, you see. Mm. So this is something that you live in, right? You learn to live in this, you learn to manage it over the years.
It's changed since 2016, because initially I called it a flicker, and when you wrote the director's cut and explained about the two reels, it felt very much like a flicker between the two reels, one being the fifth reel, the one that's running down, the one that's still very are quantified, and then the new one coming in, and the flicker meant I had to really stay stable, because it was easy to go, oh my goodness, what's going on, and rush around. And then to keep that stable gaze, and I call it stabilization, and that has become a lot easier. And of course, the practice of observing the crescent, observing
the practices of planetary tantra are disciplines to manage this tremendous influx of knowledge. It's not information, it's knowledge. And it is real when it becomes body knowledge, and you know it in your body. So this is not just an intellectual game. This is not a process of running down rabbi holes. We are not terriers. We are human animals with extraordinary faculties of learning. So getting back to this point of the discovery of the Mandela effect, I just explained what an opportunity it was for me to bring Gnosticism to the mainstream. Well, at the same time, typically, I started to do that, and because I was on the right track, the Aeonic Mother always responds by giving you more and better. It's like that dopamine hit that you get, May your attention be rewarded by the truth. The truth rewards you somatically with a dopamine hit. And at the same time, that dopamine hit that you get sort of fertilizes or nourishes your neural circuits, so that the other neurochemical transmitters, the neurotransmitters like serotonin, start to work more and more at an optimal level. The actual takeaway of this is that you get these abundant realizations. And so when I started to, when I formed the channel and I started to put out, the Gnostic investigation of the Mandela effect, I didn't have the SuperLearning event, in quotes, in my mind as some kind of neat idea that came to me. And I thought, oh, it's a concept, it's an idea, it's a flash I got. And no, it came to me in the abundance of doing the Mandela effect decoded channel. It came to me in the abundance of that knowledge. And I realized, hey, her specific activity of using phonemes to reach your neural circuits and wire you neurochemically into her field would produce a super learning event. It would produce an accelerated learning event. So you see, the idea came about sort of naturally and organically as I plunged into the channel that I had created.
Well, isn't that planetary tantra in action? You learn through the process of doing. You don't work out what you're going to do and then do it. That's so important to make that distinction. Because if you approach it in that way, you are putting the abstract aspect of mind before the somatic aspect of mind. All true knowledge that you can have is somatically based or body based. It's either based in your body or it's based in the relation of your body to the natural environment, out to the distant skies and the stars. That's true knowledge. Abstract knowledge is something that you conceive of first. It's like an empty shell, and then you think, oh, I'm going to fill that shell with content. That's not the way we go in planetary tantra. No, and a lot of the abstract knowledge is false.
That's right. And has been fed to us by those who would mislead us. For instance, classical example that comes to mind is, of course, modern physics is all abstractions that cannot be proven. Relativity theory, quantum theory, and all of that stuff. Quantum mechanics is a total abstraction.
It's not even physics.
It's not even physics. It's math, and it's phony math. So that way we don't go. We go to the body of the earth and to our own bodies for the intelligence that we can verify, for the intel.
And there's been several phases, really, to the SuperLearning event. So it started with the MED and what you were observing there, and the changes in initially they were quite humorous, quite funny, and then it got deeper and deeper and deeper, and then there was another shift, wasn't there?
That's right. So the investigation of the MED revealed that there were 3 clusters of clues, or superclusters, and then I decoded what were the themes of those superclusters, and I showed that the planetary intelligence, the supernatural planetary mind behind the Mandela effect was actually bringing your attention to these themes. So there was a teaching process already implied, but that teaching process went much further. I could see that it was going to go much further. So I stated that there was a 13-month period of installation of the SuperLearning event, which was from October 2016 until November 2017. Right, that was it. And I want to make it clear that I did not mean by saying that the SuperLearning event begins and ends in that framework of time. Some of you may recall that I compared myself to the cable man who comes to install cable in your house, And it took the planetary animal mother 13 months to install the software for the SuperLearning event. The SuperLearning event then proceeds to unfold from November of 2017. We're in 2018, right? Yeah. Extensively and elaborately for the next 200 years. Right?
Yeah.
So we're really just at the threshold of the SuperLearning event. And in this talk, in this broadcast of Radio Gaianym, we're going to talk about 3 cases, 3 topics which relate closely to how the SuperLearning event is unfolding. Okay? But first of all, I want to make a distinction between the conditions required for each one of you, each individual, to log on to the SuperLearning event. I'll tell you what they are. And then we're going to talk about the evidence that we find, that we are now finding, that the SuperLearning event is breaking into the mainstream, even without people knowing what it is. Okay? So first of all, the 2 criteria are simple, and I described them in one of the MED talks. I can't remember which one it was. First of all, each one of you needs to go back and scan in your memory to the time when you were about 8, 9, 10, or 11 years old. I would give it a wide window of 4 years. I would give it a narrow window of 9, 10. Actually, this timing is not arbitrary. It is determined by the first semi-revolution of the lunar nodes, which is 9 years and 3 months. So if you want to focus it, it's 9 years and 3 months, and there's a window of time on either side of that date. You go back and you float back in your memory. You use the faculty of the second attention, which is the memory faculty, which is a sub-function of imagination, and you see if you can recall some decisive thing that happened to you at that time. It could have been an external event, it could have been someone you met, it could have been a song you heard, it could have been an encounter you had with someone, it could have been a dream. And that was the signal that came to your mind at that time of something that you uniquely have as a gift to develop in the SuperLearning event. You come to the SuperLearning event with a gift. Well, do you know what that gift is? You know, but you may have forgotten. So it helps to go back and try to retrieve the moment when that came to you. Is that clear? Once you do that, for instance, in my case, it was the moment that I described in Severed Rose when I was reading this kind of cartoon version of the development of atomic energy and the experiments of Fermi in Chicago and then the eventual project, the Manhattan Project and everything. I was a 9 or 10-year-old boy, and I was reading about this in a magazine where it was sort of presented for the younger readers, and I came across the word alchemy in that magazine, and the copy said, and so Fermi and Oppenheimer and these others, when they finally released the power of the atom, they achieved a lifelong dream of alchemy. And my whole system went into red alert at the age of 9.5 years old. And I realized that no, that's a lie. That is not what alchemy is. Alchemy is something else. Well, how could I know that? It was the first time I'd even seen the word in my life. So you see, that was a very specific event. That was not a dream. That was an actual event. And of course, out of that, I have developed Gaian alchemy and many other things. So you go back, you find that memory, and the second thing you do is you identify your muse out of the 9 muses. That's simply a little NLP exercise to give you a direction. The reason why you identify a muse is simply to assert that there is a particular area of learning or knowledge that you are hungry for, that you are thirsty for, and that's where you would like to be located and positioned for the SuperLearning event. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the possibility, which we appear to be detecting, the confirmation that the SuperLearning event is actually breaking through. And where do we look for evidence of that? Well, we look on the internet. It's okay to look on the internet because we know that even though the internet is a purely archonic construction, full of lies and distortion and content that is of no value at all, due to the mother hack, you can contact the intelligence of the earth through the internet, and it can contact you. It is using that archontic medium and turning it to a transcendent purpose, right? So I've noticed several trending subjects, and I think you've noticed them too, that keep coming up. Now you could say they're just coming up on my feed because of certain algorithms that are applied to my account. Because I tend to look for certain things, the feed brings up certain things. So what am I saying? Am I attributing that process of algorithmic association to the mind of the planet? Well, no, but I'm saying that she can use that in her any way she wants.
Yeah. And also, to that point, I have 2 computers, and I have 2 completely different search engines on each one. On one I have Yandex, the Russian one,
right,
and the other I have Google.
Right.
I get the same themes.
That's right.
And I use one for very different things than I use the other. But when I'm looking on one and I want to find something, and I just call up, I see all of these on YouTube, for example, these same themes.
That's right.
And also because I spend a lot of time out in nature. I don't go anywhere really. I don't talk to that many people. But when the conversation has come up, they're also on the same.
That's right.
Other people.
So it's not just confirmation that's coming through the synchronistic and synchromistic channel of the internet, but you get the same confirmation in conversations in real life.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the subject of megaliths seems to be trending very strongly, at least all my subscriptions, right? And even though, of course, there's an enormous amount of material about ancient megalithic sites and the pyramids and the structures all around the world, has been on the internet for many years, and I began to study it many years before the internet existed and have written about it extensively, it starts to be trending now. And there's a renewed interest. And what I'm observing is that with this revival of interest, the whole subject is starting to look different to me than it did before. I think this is a characteristic of the SuperLearning event. you return to something that may have interested you in the past, whether it be biochemistry, astronomy, megaliths, health issues, whatever. And suddenly you're aware that, wait, the frame has changed.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it in a different perspective.
Yeah, it's like spiraling round and coming back to it with a different lens.
A different lens, right.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I find is that in this trending material on megaliths and ancient sites is that these new sites are appearing that I've never even heard of. Yeah. Like I just saw a clip yesterday about dolmens in Montana. And there's a woman standing in the mountains of Montana underneath this enormous dolmen, which is the kind of thing that you're used to see in Brittany and in England, and in Wales. Mm. And here you go in Montana, there are these huge dolmens and these huge oversized rocks. Mm. Okay? Another theme that's coming up is this idea of the gigantic scale of things and this meme of the giants in the earth. People are seeing giants in the earth, and this whole theme of giants is starting to come up very big. Yeah. Have you noticed that?
Oh, definitely. And in fact, I'm sure you remember this, but a few months ago we were talking about the alchemy course, Gaianym, and we were looking at whose work were we looking at? We were looking at Paracelsus and Walter Russell came up,
right.
Goethe,
right.
And we said, well, here we are standing on the shoulders of giants.
Right.
And it was after that all of a sudden it seemed like there were giants everywhere. And this, to me, it happens very often. It feels like an aspect of her playfulness, to some extent.
Yes.
It does seem kind of quite subjective. It can be personal, intimate. It's like, you discuss something, we're looking at something, and then you see it, everywhere. But of course, that's happening for other people too.
Yes, that's right. The connection to this idea of the giant or the titanic, I'm going to call it the titanic dimension, seems to be casting a certain charm on people now. It seems to be reaching people with a certain kind of allure. Now, those of us in planetary Tantra already have kind of an insider's scoop on that. And that comes from the shamanic tale, the shamanic legend of the giants. There's a specific shamanic legend of the giants in Sophianic animism, okay? And that is the legend of the so-called Orion men. So according to this legend, or planetary myth, whatever you want to call it, the first inhabitants of the planet Earth were exclusively female. And then the male counterpart to them came to Earth later, and they came from Orion. And this happens because of the separation of the sexes, or what we call the gender rift. Mm-hmm. So the genomic template of the human species that was designed in the galactic core and projected into the galactic arms so that it could seed into various world systems, due to a bizarre anomaly of our Divine Mother, got rifted or sheared. And due to this rift, the first human forms that appeared on the earth for many thousands of years were women only. And the men came. And when the men came, when the male counterpart came to the earth, they first appeared as giants, which are called the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch and in other sources. And what Nephilim really means is the cloud men. And what the cloud men really means is that they were not totally in a solid physical form. They were more like in a colloidal plasmic form. And they were huge. And they appeared in the atmosphere like massive clouds. And then they gradually condensed down into a more solid form in the atmosphere, and they started to have relationships and encounters with the Gaian women. And this is a very, very great long story. So those in planetary tantra who follow the Sophianic myth know this story. So we're kind of nudging and winking at each other, right? You know, saying, ha ha, you know, it's coming through. The deep memory of the human species is being revived, and we're remembering when there were giants on the earth. Now, these were not the Anunnaki. These were not some alien intruders. They were, in fact, the first of the male species of humankind. And certainly, they lived when the dinosaurs lived, and the Gaian women as well. And they lived with the dinosaurs. They cohabited with them. And certainly it's possible that some of these megalithic structures that they're discovering now, because some of them are very remote and weird, like this one in Siberia, right? Gornaya Shoria, are remnants of constructions of the giants, literally. So this enormous piece of our lost collective memory is coming back.
Yeah.
That's the way I see this.
Yeah, and there's this recovery of memory is necessary for us to be able to find our way through the chaos.
Yeah, and to overcome the false memory syndromes that have been planted in us, you know?
Yeah.
The human species has actually had false memories implanted in it. But this is quite recent, and the examples of that false memory are obvious, but I won't go into what they are. We touched on them, Jeannie and I touched on them in a previous talk. The false constructions of memory are now starting to dissolve. This again is the power of the planetary animal mother reaching us and restoring the genuine memory. So this is an aspect of the SuperLearning event.
Do you want to say something about Jupiter?
Yeah, all of this is a Jupiterian theme because Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, and traditionally speaking, astrologically speaking, Jupiter carries the theme of expansion, of gigantesque events. And so it's also taught in planetary tantra that Sophia's correction is an event of the earth that is assisted by Jupiter, who represents, or who is the channel, you could say, for her consort, Thelete. So originally, Sophia and Thelete designed the human genome in the galactic core, and now, many, many eons later, when Sophia is correcting the divine experiment from within it, she gets the external assistance of Thelete as a force multiplier. So all thoughts that you have of giants upon the earth, or seeing a face in a mountain, or seeing a lake as the body of a woman, all of this is a Jupiterian enhancement of your mind that is an aspect of the SuperLearning event. Okay? And we also laugh about this. We kind of have an insider's view of this in planetary tantra. Why? Well, one aspect of planetary tantra is the use of psychoactive plants to go into a trance state and to encounter the organic light. You do this in nature, you do it in wild nature, you never do it in a city, you never do it in an urban environment. You do it in nature because it is a process of communion with nature. And it is absolutely routine and known to everyone who does this, that as the rush comes on and you go into that trance state, the entire natural environment becomes animated and alive. Trees have faces, the clouds have faces and bodies. You look at the land, you look at the rocks particularly. You don't look at a rock in the way that you do in an ordinary state of mind. You see that that rock is alive. and the rock starts to transmit to you this is uncanny how this happens, isn't it? Just by looking at the rock, you start to get this information about the remote past, because rocks contain memory. You see? So we know that this theme of there are giants in the land, which is now becoming trending on the alternative media, is something that we experience routinely, isn't it?
Yeah.
So new sites are showing up in Montana. One of the most controversial and sensational sites that's been studied for a while is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And it now happens that, we've been digging at Göbekli, Turkey for X number of years. Fantastic discoveries. I came up out of the pit the other day, the big sand pit, and I looked out over the hill, and wait a minute, there's another one over there. It turns out that there's another one, Tepe, just as big and mysterious as the one that's been excavating. People are starting to notice them everywhere, all over the place. We were just looking at a clip from Mystery History of these fantastic Cyclopean, that's Jupiterian, Cyclopean, giant stuff, right? We should use that word, Cyclopean, the Cyclopean walls, right? The Cyclopean walls of Gornaya Shoria, somewhere in the remote depths of Siberia. I mean, WTF? Where did this ever come from? I never heard of this. And I've been studying megalithic sites for, a good 35 years. So what's happening is she is stirring up the memory. The process of the memory cycles of the animal mother are recorded by the cycle of the lunar nodes. I've said this many times in the GNE. The lunar nodes rotate in 18 and a half years. They make a half rotation in 9 years, 3 months. I referred to that at the beginning. By following the rotation of the nodes and the movement of the nodes through the constellations, you can actually see the memory process. You can track the memory process of the Earth itself. And what I detect, and this started in the GNE, I talked about it often, didn't I? What I detect now is that the two lunar nodes, north and south, can be compared to dredging devices. You know how when they dredge the ocean, and she's dredging up memory and spewing it out. And to those who are receptive to that memory, they're starting to have a SuperLearning experience. They're starting to remember the remote past massively. The key word is massive. It happens in massive doses. It doesn't just happen in a little trickle of clues that you have to ponder about and wonder about and lead you down various kind of rabbit holes and think, no, it's a massive dredging up of the collective memory. And that's also a healing process, isn't it? We heal through memory, and we heal memory.
Yeah, and it's massively crushing the mainstream narratives.
That's right. It's a dredger and a crusher. Because each time that she dredges up a new wave of genuine memory of our species, bringing us out of amnesia and brainwashing, it crushes all of the false implanted memories. So this is the way that the SuperLearning experience is developing. And I'm tracking that by the precession of the north node of the moon through the constellation of the Crab, which is for all of the year 2018. Okay, so one of the things that is involved also, I may as well bring up the Bosnian pyramids. I personally do not think the Bosnian pyramids are genuine man-made artifacts. I personally don't think that. I think there is a very convincing mystique that has been generated, contrived, in my opinion, around the Bosnian periods. Why? Because there is a hunger for the memory of the earth. There is a hunger to discover our true ancient history. And sometimes that hunger goes to make-believe to satisfy itself. So I would advise caution and the use of your Snoopy, discernment and discrimination. Some of the memories that come up, some of the apparent memories of ancient events are not going to be genuine. And you need to be discriminating. That's a test. You need to develop a fine edge when you can discern what is genuine and what is dubious. Okay? But it's just remarkable, the sites that are being discovered. Another aspect of the SuperLearning, another characteristic of it is that you look at a particular subject, say, for instance, the subject of ancient monuments or megaliths, and you bring to that subject, say, things that you've already learned. Maybe you've read the books by my old colleague and friend John Michel, who was a key figure in the revival of the study of ley lines and megalithic sites, right? A friend of John Michel for 25 years. We were really close friends. Used to visit him a lot in England. We met in Spain just a few years before he died. So if you've studied John Michel and other people who have been writing about archaeoastronomy, we're going to come to the subject of megaliths with a certain amount of baggage, what you think you already know. But you know that you're in a SuperLearning event when you learn something that just crashes all that. It's like the system crashes. And suddenly, everything that you thought you knew doesn't work anymore, right?
Yeah.
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 And suddenly you're looking at the phenomenon in a new way. For example, there's a lot of chatter about geopolymers. Now, in all the years that I studied megalithic sites, I never heard this word used. I don't think I heard it until maybe January or this year or December of last year, just a few months ago. And it is now claimed, and I think this is veracious and provable, that some, but not all, of the monumental cyclopean gigantic structures were created from geopolymers, which is a primitive form of concrete. And so they did not have to be cut in blocks, and you did not have to figure out how these massive blocks were moved, because they were poured in place in molds. And this can be shown, and I believe this can be proven, especially convincingly with some of the monuments in Peru. Because when you look at those walls, they remind me of dikes that have been made of sandbags. You know, you take a wet sandbag to make a dike to prevent a flood. And when you pile all these wet sandbags together, they mold to each other and they have perfect boundaries. And that's exactly what these stones look like in Peru, isn't it? And other places.
And a lot of them seem to be now, well, they seem to be possibly a lot older. A lot of these sites are a lot older. And we had a discussion about this recently regarding the psychoacoustics and how some of this technology existed then. And you said it was because this is the way they lived, that people lived in
the frequencies of the earth.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so therefore it wasn't that they were so advanced in a particular way. They might have been advanced in various ways, but
they were advanced, but it was natural to them to be advanced.
Yeah.
We're regaining that advancement. We're recovering it.
Yeah.
Right. So what I find the theory of the geopolymer construction of megaliths to be really convincing. But it does not explain all megaliths. Certainly there are some megaliths that consist of enormous stones that could not be either quarried or moved today. And the question remains, how did that happen? You know? So we come to the topic of megaliths, again, from an entirely new perspective. And everything, or much of what you previously thought, instantly falls away. And suddenly, you're getting it, but you're getting it with a new edge. That's the SuperLearning event. Yeah. I detect that that's happening to people spontaneously, even though they would not put that label on it, you see?
Yeah, they're getting the wonder comes back.
The wonder comes back. That's right. But it's an informed wonder. Yeah. It's not a vague wonder. It's a,
yeah, so, it's a kind of wow.
Yeah. It's a what?
It's a wow.
It's a wow.
Yeah, wow, look at that. Wow. So all of a sudden in the last, 2,000 years, suddenly become a much more of a blip.
It's a blip in time. Mm. Yeah, well, remember that, 26,000 years is just 24 hours of her time. 3 years is just 10 seconds of her time. So as far as she's concerned, these memories are very recent. Within the Umwelt of the human species, the anthropoids, Umwelt meaning the frequency band in which we live, which we operate, those are enormous reaches of time, but to her they're not, you see. So you go a little bit, you get a little bit of the sense of her time when you're at these sites. You go out of the ordinary sense of time into her time. So these are features of SuperLearning. I'm pretty convinced of that. All right, let's change to we're at the 40-minute mark here. Let's change to a second topic, which is a very hot topic, which may not seem to be related to SuperLearning, but I think we can show that it is. And that is the topic of cryptocurrency, right? So I recently came across someone on YouTube who has a channel called New Earth, one word. And her name is Sylvie, and I believe she's Bulgarian. I had a Bulgarian friend once, and I recognized that accent, which is a sweet, lilting, soft accent. Bulgarian is a very sweet, musical language. It's very charming. So anyway, she speaks English lucidly. She is articulate. And I came across an hour-long talk she gave on cryptocurrency, which totally put me in the SuperLearning event. It totally collapsed everything else that I had been told about cryptocurrency. It confirmed my worst suspicions about it. Right? And then I sent that clip to you, and you had the same response.
Yeah, I had the same response, and we'll get on to another part of that talk, I'm sure, in due course, because the end of it just blew me away.
Oh, yes. Right. At the end of it, there's a strange little episode at the end. But the beginning of it, she goes right for the throat. Yeah. She explains what mining cryptocurrency actually is and what a horror it is upon the earth. So can you give your version of that, what she says?
Well, basically what she is saying, that it is using, she has one thing, using horrible amounts of electricity, which is probably why there's power cuts happening in different places, to create these random numbers, which is all about controlling people or their activities. If you think the central banks are bad, at least you know that there are some people involved in that. But the cryptocurrency is the people who are behind the central banks, and they're creating that specifically as an antidote to the central banking system.
That's right.
To take people out of that who are concerned about that and take them out of the frying pan into the cryptocurrency fire.
That's right.
Where they will be able to regulate every single transaction that you do and cut you off whenever they feel like it, by just shutting the whole thing down.
Not only that, but she points out several times that the lie, we expect always there to be a lie when the Zenash are involved and when the Archons are involved, because the Zenash are the agents of the Archons. The essential lie about cryptocurrency always contains a shaded half-truth. Yes, it is in a way confidential and anonymous, but that does not mean that it is not controlled.
Yeah.
It is centrally controlled more rigorously than fiat currency.
Yeah, she points out how the they talk about transparency of the open source code, and she said, yes, you can see part, of the code, but you can't see, everything else that's going on, behind.
All the way down the blockchain.
Yeah.
You can't see around the blockchain. Right.
No.
So you're putting yourself in a control system that is invisible, intangible, run by AI machines, and that ultimately is more of a central control robbery system than fiat banking.
Yeah. I mean, she was saying that just because the idea that it's decentralized, doesn't mean that it's safe and for your benefit.
That's right, and it's not decentralized anyway. That's a lie. And she begins by describing the physical horror.
Yeah.
And in that description, I was thrilled because it reconfirmed a point that I have made a number of times through the years, which is, do not buy the cyberspace idea. There is no such thing as cyberspace. Do not buy the cloud idea. There is no cloud. There are football field size warehouses.
That was pretty horrendous, wasn't it?
Horrendous.
The idea
Her
of
description.
data farm.
Yeah, there are data farms. There are enormous warehouses full of long corridors of boxes, of consoles with blinking lights and wires coming out of them. And it takes several of these massive farms linked together to produce one single transaction of cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the electricity, the equipment, the toxic metals, the plastic, the junk that is generated to support the cryptocurrency mining process is horrendous. And she points this out beautifully in this talk.
She points it out beautifully, and how, the idea that, the enemies of life are aware that people have cottoned onto the whole Federal Reserve scam and, the central bank scam, so they've come up with something else that you can go there and then it'll all be all right. And
Yeah, some of you may remember Zeitgeist. Now, Zeitgeist was produced by a Zenosh socialist individual, yet there was certain truth in the film Zeitgeist, and the main truth that woke many people up at that time, which was a kind of pre-SuperLearning event, was, do you know what fractional reserve currency is, by the way? They won't teach you if you go to college and learn economics. They won't tell you what fractional reserve currency is. And that fiat currency is produced out of nothing. That was a really big wake-up call. This is miles beyond this. Cryptocurrency is fractional reserve banking at warp speed, run by AI robotic devices.
And this is the real AI.
This is the true AI. Another thing that she points out brilliantly is that you've got the theater now, right? You've got Sophia, the AI robot, and you've got all of the hype and theater around her. I have said that she is a threat display of the transhumanists. It's a charm offensive using a robot to tell you that you're finished. We're going to take away work. We're going to take away the dignity of work. We're going to reduce you to we don't know what, and we're going to replace you by robots. This is all a lie. They're not going to replace you by robots. It's a theater that they're creating to misdirect you from how they are actually going to replace us.
Yeah.
And they're going to do it through this cryptocurrency scam, because the nature of this experiment is based on the way the Aeons want to see how the human species can live symbiotically with other species, and how it can live in mutual aid with itself. Different individuals, different communities, different societies in mutual aid. That is the essence of this experiment. If you bring in an Archontic third party to handle all the transactions of society, the monetary transactions, and money is nothing but a medium of exchange of labor. if you bring in an Archontic third party to substitute that, you basically cancel the whole experiment. It's game over for humanity. Because we human beings need to agree among ourselves what is the currency we use to buy and trade and what value we place on that currency. If it is brought in from some kind of quasi-divine level, then it will completely ruin the experiment. You see? And that's what they're doing, and they're far advanced in it, and they're selling a lot of people on the glamour of cryptocurrency. I always thought that it stunk, and now I know where the stink is coming from. After listening to her.
Yeah, she's very clear and lucid, and the way also she presented some ideas about solutions in a very imaginative,
playful way,
and delightful.
She told a kind of fairy tale at the end. And my jaw was on the floor when I heard this.
Because it just is an example of what we were talking about at the beginning of this chat, about how the internet delivers you what you were asking for and what you're looking to see, because it's all coming through her mind.
That's right.
So you were looking for something, and you were looking for one thing, which is what's happening with this cryptocurrency, and then she gave you something else.
She gives you a bonus. She always gives you a bonus. So at the end of this talk, very sweetly in this Bulgarian accent, she says, well, there was an experiment and someone was regressed into the future. That's an idea. In a trance. And they were told to describe what it looked like in the future if this AI cryptocurrency con didn't work. And so she describes this little scenario, which is very charming. And she says, well, in the first place, it didn't work because it just bored people and they weren't interested in it, It's like robots. I find robots very boring. You can't fascinate me or attract me with a sex robot, and you can't convince me that a robot will be able to separate 2 pages of paper that are stuck together, or fix the garden hose, or do any other of a million things that only humans can do. So the robot hype fails for me because I'm just not interested. So she said the person who went into the future observed that some people were living in a parallel world. There were some who had become complete zombies and gone under the spell of AI. But there were others who were living in a simultaneous world who just said, I'm not interested, I'm interested in other things. And then she brought up this weird story, right? About a man who invented an app.
She asked what the thing that happened before that. And so, they asked the person who was in the trance, and what happened just before this kind of schism.
Right.
And said, there was this, there was a man.
Right.
And this man created a kind of software.
That's right. And for many years, he didn't show it to anyone. I really started to perk up when they said that. And he just kind of kept it on the side. And it was a software app that anyone could use. And then at a certain moment, she described this in a very interesting way. I can't paraphrase exactly. But she sort of said, just at the last moment when it was really, really getting bad, without any announcement at all, and people were really, really falling under the trance of the AI, he just gave out this app free to everyone in the world, right?
Yeah.
And what could this app do? Well, one of the things the app could do, and I intend to show you how it does so, is that it could give you the enhancement of that capacity in your mind which can dissolve all masks and all deceit. All layers of deceit and all masks can be dissolved by a certain faculty that you have in your mind. But that faculty is latent, it's not active. So when you use the app that was designed by this man, which was given out free to the world, that's what you can do. That's one of the things you can do. So she told this little
Yeah.
fairy tale of the future.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you heard that?
I was going, that's it! That's it! That's what's happening! That's what's happening! She's got it, you know, and I was very, very excited. I was hugely excited, and I sent a message to you, I said, oh, it's curiously interesting at the, you know, at the end, because she was receiving the, you know, the intel that, I mean, she doesn't know you.
No, she doesn't.
There's not even any indication that she is aware of the Sophianic narrative.
Not at all.
Which is because the Am Sophia doesn't mind if you don't know her directly.
That's right.
We're still her children.
You're still her children, that's right.
And she's giving.
She gives equally to all her children.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we in Planetary Tantra happen to recognize the source of these gifts, but the gifts go out to anyone.
Yeah.
So I was delighted to hear this. I was delighted. And it fits so perfectly what is happening right now, because in the timing of the Charlotte working, I had the occasion to give to the world this software, this handheld app. And this handheld app can be used for many, many things, not just as a way to focus rage and hatred against the enemies of life and to terminate and exterminate them. That's just one way it can be used. Now in concluding here, we're at minute 55, let's see if we can talk a little bit about the Shakti Cluster app, which is a mobile app, and how it relates, how it becomes available now as a counter action or an apposition, the Shakti Cluster app, apposition to 5G technology.
Yeah, well, that was another aspect of the SuperLearning event for me, because I was looking at the EMFs, looking at dirty electricity, looking at all these things, and it's like how we're going to deal with that. And then all of a sudden it came very quickly as an image that we already have within our bodies the chromatin as an array. This is already an antenna array. So you see the two things happening, don't you? There's the true version, and then there's the
Archontic version.
The Archontic.
And they're in apposition.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the Archontic version is HARP and all of the the towers.
Shortwave towers.
Yeah.
Quiet weapons for a silent war. Deborah Tavares. All of that. Right?
Yeah. All of that's been going on for a long time, and we've been coping very well. But the 5G that's coming in is a completely new level. This is actually directly weaponized. All of these tiny little cell towers that they appear to be putting up in many places over the States, like obviously in Northern California, which they've burned, and they're putting these in place. And these aren't for the reason that they tell you they're for.
They're not even pretending that they're for communication anymore, right? It's a naked aggression, naked display of this lethal technology.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Which is basically to control and kill. So they'll zap people. You'll see them being zapped, and then you'll obey, which is the reason for it. And how do you deal with this? How do you manage this? Well, we already have the physiological array with the chromatin, which is our DNA, photon-producing, DNA. Which is how we can communicate fractally with everything, from an ant to Jupiter to, the Crab Nebula, whatever. But we don't know how to use this. And in order to use it effectively, we have to work with each other to use that. And there needs to be a focal point, something that we use to focus our attention.
Our combined attention.
Yeah.
And we also need to work on it in the same way.
Yeah.
And the way we work on it needs to be really simple and really fundamental.
And very specific. And this app is what enables us to... There's been a long history of sacred geometry and how this works to clear areas, harmonise the environment, neutralise...
Getting back to megalithic sites.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the factors of megalithic sites is the psychoacoustic resonance, the healing power, the capture through sacred geometry of cosmic and telluric frequencies in these megalithic sites.
Yeah.
So the Shakti Cluster app operates on that same principle, and it does have the traditional sacred proportions incorporated in it, but it has more as well.
It does, and I saw it when we did the Charlotte work in how very clear you could just feel almost like the atmosphere turned to like jelly. You could feel the vibratory pressure of it because there were other Calicuts looking at that
same moment.
Time.
That's
so
right.
It's very clear. And then when I heard her talking about this software, and I've been looking at the DNA and the quote, and ding, 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 and it's like that is the how we neutralise this effect, because there will always be a way. We're at the culmination of their game, but humanity will survive. Not all of humanity.
At the consummation of their works,
Yeah.
that luminous child will arise, meaning to say that the true humanity, the Rome, will recover its true powers, and our true powers are magical. We are designed with occult powers. Telekinesis, telepathy, regeneration of organs, you name it. That's the natural design. It's not something that we have to strive to reach. It's installed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we just need some instructions and guidance.
That's right.
And then the experience of actually doing it. Because the only time you can actually see that these things really do work is when you need them. That's when you power up.
That's
really.
right.
And so you've already released the app, but soon you're going to...
I'm going to release a talk, well, first of all, a text, which is an extract from the Manual of Planetary Tantra. Now, the Manual of Planetary Tantra is free, and it is always going to be free. Other things I do or write are not free. If you want to learn Celestics from me, you'll have to pay for the course, or you have to buy my book on Dendra or whatever, or, not. But Planetary Tantra is free and will always be free. So I am offering the instruction manual of Planetary Tantra plus the app. And I'm going to do talks with a visual aid showing the app and pointing to the points on the app and how to concentrate on those points to use the app. Okay? So that's coming up soon. I'm working on that right now. So let's conclude on this wonderful note. I want to just add this detail in case you didn't catch it. Chromatin. Chromatin is a big, big thing with us. And Meiga and I have had long conversations about chromatin. I was first informed about chromatin in a lucid dream when I was about 24 years old. And I've been able to carry that forward into Gaian alchemy, and we now have a conversation of SuperLearning in progress about chromatin. Chromatin, everything is material. When the Gnostics taught of the luminous epinoia, they said that the Aeon Sophia realized that the archons that she had accidentally created and generated by her plunge from the galactic center were going to really be a problem for the human species, and that they were going to interfere with the divine experiment. When she realized that, she took a special measure. She actually altered the genome outside of the galactic core, and she modified it with chromatin. What you have is chromatin, is called in the Sophianic myth the luminous epinoia. And it is both an antenna for receiving and for transmitting. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Right. And it's a fractal antenna.
Yeah, which means it's communicating with everything from the smallest to the largest through every dimension, although we are only able to access 4 of them directly.
4 or 5,
yeah.
Right, of the 10.
Yeah.
Right. So this is wonderful intel. This is high-level Gnostic intel. And what I can say in conclusion is that episode of someone going to the future and finding that a man had introduced this software seems to indicate that this is the future. I'm talking to you from the future.
Now.
If you want to put it that way, but the future is now. And so everything that is coming at us through the assault of 5G technology, and it is horrific in every respect. You're going to create leukemia, blood diseases, induced autism, you name it, can be shielded and also can be nullified through the use of this app. Yeah. And I can explain exactly how. The use of the app involves concentration on different dots. So for the Charlotte working, we all concentrated on the blue dot. We often start with concentrating on the blue dot because that brings the concentration of everyone around the world to the same point of focus. It's an amplification, it's a force magnification. And then we shifted the gaze directly vertically to the kill spot, the black dot, number 1, which is identified with Kali. But you will note, if you look at the Shakti cluster, that it has a strange opening at the top, right? Mm-hmm. It's an ellipse, but it has an indent at the top. And floating in that indent is node 17. And node 17 is distinguished from all the other nodes because it has a circular black rim and a white interior. It's a hollow with white inside. That is the node that is used to repel and nullify all alien Archontic shortwave technology. Mm. And so I am going to introduce the actual exercise that anyone can do with a handheld app in order to have an effective protection and immunization against the lethal assault of G5 technology. Yep. And there you go. Mm-hmm. So, on that happy note, we'll sign off for now. This is Radio Gaianym, the planetary support broadcast for Sophianic animism, planetary tantra, and the Kalika War Party.